Chapter 6, An Artist's Proof. Ty had been psyching himself out all morning. 1,000 possible outcomes and 1,000 possible reasons. There was no way to predict the result of what he was about to do, so instead of fretting about it any further, he took a deep breath and crossed the corridor, wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans. She was rummaging around in her locker, searching for a book or a folder or a reason not to turn around. "Hey!" Ty greeted confidently. At least, he hoped he sounded confident. Velvet jumped, twisting around to face him, her back pressed up against the wall of metal lockers. "Shit, you scared the life out of me." She laughed, holding her hand to her chest, as if trying to shield her heart. Shield her heart. Good idea, Ty thought, because this was bound to end in heartache. He was bound to rip her to shreds, chew her up and spit her right out. He was going to break her, ruin her, hurt her. And yet, he was certain that he was already in love with her. "Sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." He smiled softly. "I was just wondering, what are you doing this Saturday?" Velvet rose her thick but tamed brows. "I'm not sure," she said simply. "Probably checking up on my friend, making sure he doesn't accidentally walk off a cliff or something." She joked. "Oh." He deadpanned. "Okay, well, have fun then. I should go, Ty." She stopped him, gripping onto the sleeve of his denim jacket, forcing him to stay rooted to the spot. "What did you want to ask me?" He gulped. "Do you want to grab a drink sometime? Or lunch, if you like food." "I mean, yeah, you probably like food, everyone likes food, I just mean to." "Sure," she chuckled. "Really?" Ty's eyes widened in surprise, barely able to contain his utter disbelief. "Meet me at the arcade on Saturday. 1 o'clock, Velvet decided. If she was going to let herself be vulnerable, even for a second, then she needed to ensure that she was in charge. If she let herself be open to the idea of dating someone, then she was going to control the pace. "Oh, and bring a friend. Corey's coming with me." Sure. Yes." "Great." Ty grinned. "I'll see you then." He spun on his heels and glided off down the corridor, trying to keep the joy off his face and contain his excitement. He wanted to explode in hysteria, right there and then. He didn't even care that they wouldn't be alone. It was progress, it was something, it was a date. Plus, if he brought Dorian, he could give him careful instructions to drag Corey off somewhere and leave him alone with Velvet, at least for a little while. "Velvet, you've got to be kidding me," Corey complained with a groan. She'd broken the news to him over lunch and he hadn't taken it as well as she had hoped. "Why do I have to go?" "Because you do." She rolled her eyes. "It will be fun, Dorian will be there." "That's your selling point?" "Oh, please. For me?" He rolled his eyes. "I never said no." An ecstatic grin spread across her face, lighting up her features and deepening her dimples. "Thanks, babes. You're the best. I thought you didn't like Ty anyway." He reminded her. "I never said I didn't like him. I need to give myself a chance to fall for him. And he's hot. What have I got to lose?" "Your dignity," Corey murmured. Luckily, she didn't hear him, but while her ears needed adjusting, her eyes were working just fine. She studied the food in front of him, barely touched, being prodded and moved around with his fork. "Eat something," she urged gently. Corey tried not to think about the screwed-up post-it note in his bag, the ones stuck onto his walls and tucked under his pillow, the ones he kept pinned to the fridge and right in front of his toothbrush. He'd gone through 2 stacks of sticky notes this month alone. It was turning into an obsession, a disorder, another fucked up thing in his life that was slowly getting out of hand. And they all said the same thing. Eat. And now, Velvet was saying it too. "I can't, I'm too nervous. Me and Dorian are doing our presentation." Chapter 7, Arcading. Corey's blinds were pulled shut, a stream of light filtering in through the thin gap between the window frame and the curtain. Sunlight trickled into his darkened room, and he groaned internally. He was already late, he knew that. It was almost 1:30 and he hadn't even left his bed yet. The thought of getting up and entering the outside world wasn't appealing. He wished he could stay there forever, just like this, curled up in his navy bedsheets, his eyes squeezed shut. The rest of the world ceased to exist. It was just him in his bed, isolated from the chores of society. His mind was free to wonder, to ponder about the nature of the universe he resented living in. About all the beautiful things, just existing without a care in the world. A dripping tap, a faded postcard, a smile from a baby. And all the ugly things. The screaming, the blood, the gunshots, the knife wounds, but they were all the same in the end. And he was all of them at once. As he shifted in bed, he heard the crinkle of a crumpled sheet of paper. He pulled it out from under his tired body and his eyes stung as they met the words tattooed onto the page. When he returned from Dorian's last night, fueled with mind-numbing rage, he just started writing. His brain wasn't in it, neither was his heart. It was pure instinct, passion, impulse. As he read over his cursed words, he realized who it was about. Fucking hell, he murmured, screwing it up and tossing it into the bin. It was the most beautifully raw thing he'd ever written, and that's why he could never look at it again. There was too much soul in it, too much of himself. He was vulnerable, exposed, insecure. Because reading that poem was like looking in a mirror. Corey finally managed to drag himself out of bed and start getting ready, brushing his teeth with an absent mind and pulling his gray jumper over his head. He ignored the thousands of missed calls from Velvet as he left the house, passing his father on the way out. He was sleeping soundly on the sofa, the ashtray on the coffee table full of rotting cigarette butts while empty beer cans littered the floor. The arcade was just a short walk into town. The sky was clear and bright despite the gentle autumn breeze firing daggers at his flesh, the fallen leaves crunching beneath his boots. The trees were stripped bare of their leaves, dying and decaying as piles of death on the ground. Just another way people found beauty in the decaying, the dead, the ugly. The arcade was a flat box of ordered bricks. The mundane building was squeezed between a pet shop and a patisserie, and the only hint that it was an arcade was a small sign hanging on the black door. As Corey neared, he noticed a figure leant against the wall, smoke encircling him like a fantasy creature found in the dark wooded pathways of a children's book. Dorian smiled crookedly as Corey drew closer, the cigarette hanging out of the corner of his mouth adding to the boyish charm that poured out of him. "Thought you wouldn't show," he observed. "I considered it." "Well, I'm glad you came," Dorian assured him. "You smoke?" "No." "Since when did you?" Dorian smiled guiltily. "I don't. Not really. Only when I'm stressed or bored out of my mind." Corey nodded in understanding. There was an unrecognized presence between them, a twang of guilt, embarrassment, regret. "Where are the others?" he asked thickly. "Velvet and Ty are inside. I thought I'd give them some privacy." Dorian scanned him up and down, stubbing the cigarette out on the heel of his Converse. Corey didn't exactly radiate health and happiness. His eyes were circled with exhaustion, his cheeks hollowed, his skin tinged gray from lack of sunlight. And yet, he still pulled it off. He still looked good, better than good. "I'm sorry," Dorian started simply. "Let's not do this." Corey turned to face him, wide emerald eyes meeting cold black abysses. "Don't apologize." "But I want to," Dorian protested. "I shouldn't have, Aya. Just don't. Please." Corey begged. Dorian hesitated. "Ugh.